Hello and welcome back to Digital Photo Mentor live photo editing. Assuming you are a returning viewer, and if you are a brand new viewer, welcome for the first time. We have a lot of regulars that join us here every week. I was not here last week because I had some issues with coughing in my throat, but we premiered a video about the Luminar Neo Studio light tool, and people really enjoyed that one. So today we're going to be working on landscape photo editing. So I've got a bunch of landscape photos that have been submitted by you guys, and we're going to be working on them in both Lightroom and Luminar. So let's just see who's here. I'd like to work on people's images that are here and do those first so that you get something edited of your images. So we're going to be looking at these from a few different perspectives. And I'm also going to let you know what's coming up in the next coming weeks. We've already decided on a few themes next week. So September 20th, we're going to be doing sunset. So also sunrise works too. So sunrise or sunset, we want to see your sunrise photos. And then the week after that, so that's going to be, where are we here? So that'll be the 20th next week. Then the 27th of September is going to be harvest. So in the Northern Hemisphere, it's fall and it's harvest time. So harvest might be something from your vegetable garden, might be a flower in a vase, might be dead flowers in your yard, or it could be something that you found at the farmer's market, or some cultivating in the farmer's fields. So I'll leave that open to interpretation. Then we're going to be doing still life after that, but we'll remind you of those a little bit later. So I see Catherine, Debbie. We got a couple of Debs. Debbie from Wisconsin. Is it your first time submitting images, Debbie? I don't think I've seen any from you before, but I have your images, so welcome. David and Marty, I have yours as well. Sheila is battening down the hatches for Hurricane Lee. Well, I hope it doesn't hit, or if it does, that it's not too bad. So be well and take care there. Trish from Down Under. Okay, sir, we could do harvesting honey. Absolutely. So bees for sure. Yeah. Debbie says she watches all the time. Is it your first submission though, Debbie? Because I do think I've seen you come attending, but I haven't seen your images before. So I thank you for submitting. Awesome. Perfect. Merle and Shelly, I think I have yours as well, Shelly. And is that your first time submitting, first time watching? We love to have people joining us who have not seen this before. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to explain it. I've got all the images sort of marked with a color coding here in Lightroom as to which software the person that submitted it would like it to be edited in. So the ones that I've got marked in yellow are designated for Lightroom, and the ones marked in blue are designated for Luminar Neo, and anything marked with green is sort of my choice. The person uses both. All right. So let me see. Is Kelly here yet? I want to show hers. If not, I might start with Marty's. Let's see. Okay. So Marty had a couple of questions. Let me see. Deb May. Is AJ here yet? I haven't seen AJ here. But I do see Shelly. Okay. So Shelly, you know what? We're going to start with yours. And she submitted these images of these trees from her yard, she said. And that they have this really unique kind of bark that looks like it's shredding. Let me go into my presentation mode here. There we go. And she wanted to know how to bring out the bark a little bit more. So I can definitely talk about that. And there's a couple of different shots here. So she did one horizontal and one vertical. And then the other image that she sent, you had asked about how to bring out the sunset more. And I'm actually going to save this one for next week, Shelly, because this image actually inspired me to create that category. So I'm going to save that one for next week. So I'll make you tune in again next week. But you also asked about the how to bring out the deer. And I want to just kind of address that before I move on, because I didn't see any deer, right? So the challenge with the sunset, Rob, if you could please share how to get better sunset pictures, that would be great. Tips for better sunset photos, that would be great. anytime I reference an article, Rob's going to put it in the chat, and it'll also be in the video description below if you're watching this as a replay, right? So to see the deer, I had to really increase the exposure, and I still didn't see any deer. And then I had to zoom in, and there they are at 200%. So they were really far away. So the first thing is, if you want to capture the deer, you need a much longer lens. This one was done with a 13 mil lens. It's showing me. There we go. Okay, you can see that it was done with a 13 mil lens. There you go. That's better. So really wide, taking in the whole scene. But when you have a sunset like this, it's very difficult. Your camera can't capture the detail in the land and in the sky when it's bright like that at the same time. So this is a perfect kind of scene for doing HDR. Rob, once you've got that sunset article, the next one I want you to find is to HDR or not, and put that one. Did I get your landscape images? I'm not sure, Sheila. I don't think I have anything from you. Let me just double check here. I don't see any. Nothing labeled Sheila. Maybe I put them in another category, but let me just do a search here. So here's a quick lesson on searching. Okay, so if I want to search for images that are in the not used yet folder, there's also a series or a bunch that have been edited. So I put those into a different folder, but it'll search all of these subfolders. So if I'm in the top level folder called not used yet, all of these down below are subfolders. And if I open up this little filter bar at the top, I did that by using the / key, which is right above return. I can now search for any text or different types of metadata. Okay, so I just searched for Sheila, and those are the images that I have for you, Sheila. So I've got some winter ones, but nothing new that's a landscape. So just a quick lesson on searching in Lightroom. Okay, so it searched all of these subfolders in all the different categories for anything that had anything Sheila. So Sheila in the title, Sheila in the caption, Sheila in the keywords or metadata, that kind of thing. Okay, even if she had put her copyright on, for example. Okay, so no, I don't have your landscape photos, Sheila. Okay, so that was just a little aside for searching. So this one here, I'm going to just leave this one for sunset, Shelly, and we'll come back to that one. So if you want to get a sunset that captures the land detail and the sky detail, you're going to need to do HDR. Okay, so I'm just going to save this one on sunset, and let's take a look at these trees. Okay, so they definitely are interesting trees, right, with this type of bark. And the same thing I would say here is you just need to get closer. So if you really want to capture the bark, get a lot closer to the subject. And that's one of the things that you can talk about editing, or we can talk about how to edit and bring out things. But I also give tips for doing that in the camera as well. So if I think you can improve the photo, and this is something that's in your yard, right? So go back and try this again, because I'm actually going to be writing an article for next week for the website talking about photographing your garden. So this might be a great opportunity for you to pick up some tips on that, Shelley. So look for that article coming on the website, right? So if you're not familiar with our actual website, if you've only come here to YouTube, digitalphotomentor.com is our website where you'll find actual more photography articles, right? Okay, so this one here tells me that you photographed it with a Nikon D7500 and a 10 to 20 mil lens. So again, wide angle lens. So you're seeing lots of the whole scene, right, in both of this one and the horizontal one. Now, I actually chose this one to edit, and I'll show you why. When you're dealing with something that has a lot of texture, like this tree bark, okay, you want to capture it so that the light is skimming across it. Hey, Rob, you've got another article to find on capturing texture. There should be one on how to capture texture in your images. So even though the item itself has texture, you need to make sure that the lighting enhances that. Let me just zoom in a little bit here, going to the develop mode. I'm just going to crop this way down just for a moment, just to show you Okay, so that's kind of where I would actually start photographing this one. And if I really wanted to focus in on the bark, I'd be looking at photographing super tight and doing something more like this. Okay, so get really, really tight um, in on the subject. Now, can you see the difference between what the bark looks like here in the shade versus here in the sun? See how much more texture it picks up in the sun, because the sun is enhancing that contrast with the pattern and the texture in the actual tree. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this one here. So my editing process for most images is the first thing I want to do is change the camera profile, and she's using Lightroom, so I'm going to use Lightroom. I just had to check my color coding system. And once you open this here, you'll see, I'm just going to close the thumbnails here. You'll see camera matching. If you don't, just open this little triangle. Okay, so where it says camera matching. So these are the camera profiles that you would find in your camera if you were changing the camera style. So landscape is one of them. Okay, so landscape brings out more blue and more green in the image, but it also enhances the contrast. In this case, I don't want more contrast because it's already fairly contrasty. So I'm just going to check some of the others. Okay, so neutral, portrait, standard. I actually don't mind portrait of all things. Okay, so I might start with one of these. Okay, so I'm always checking the camera profiles first. Okay, then I'm looking at things like the histogram. Is there anything clipping? To find out if there's anything clipping, press J on the keyboard. Right, Rob, you're gonna be busy tonight. Now you need to find Lightroom keyboard shortcuts cheat sheet, sign up. So if you'd like to get our cheat sheet, you can sign up and do that, and it will give you a page that you can print out of Lightroom keyboard shortcuts. So I'm going to turn down the highlights. To get the clipping warnings showing like this, I'm just going to dial it up. I'm pressing the Alt Option button. Okay, so Alt or Option, depending whether you're Mac or Windows. And that's showing what's clipping or off the graph. Okay, so that means there will be no detail there. So I'm going to take it to the left, and you can see that it brings the highlights down. So the highlights are represented on this side of the histogram. Okay, so I'm bringing those down. If I take them even farther, you can see that it really starts to pick up the sky. Okay, so the original looks like the sky is blown out. There's actually quite a lot of detail there. Okay, I'm also going to do my shift double click trick, which we just did a video short on, and it's literally this quick. Hold your shift key down, hover over the word blacks, and double click it. And what that does is it moves that slider to the side until the graph is touching the edge. So it means that I have pure black. I usually like to go a little further. I'm using that Alt Option key again. And then I can do the same with whites. Okay, but I adjusted the highlights first because I wanted to make sure that I brought that sky down. Okay, so now I've got the highlights and the black set. Okay, so you can see that it's touching the graph on this side, not going over, and touching the graph over here and going over. Now I'm going to work on the exposure slider. So I do blacks and whites first, then exposure. Okay, so exposure affects the midtones. Okay, so I'm going to brighten it a little bit. And then after doing that, I might go back and add a little bit more black, or check to see that the whites need to come down a little bit. Okay. Now to pick up texture in an object, I'm just zooming in here. In this bark here, you can use the clarity or the texture slider, and they work differently. Okay, so let's take a look at clarity. Okay, clarity looks for edge contrast. So an edge is something where there is light against dark, and it enhances that difference, right? So that's clarity. Texture works on is exactly what it was described as, texture, okay? Oh, it looks like there's even some little berries in that tree or something. And I find that texture, like you notice that it hasn't made the sky kind of go all wonky, whereas clarity kind of is a little too much, right? Like if I zoom back out, there's too much detail, right? Like let me just show you what happens if you enhance the detail too much. And where's my sharpness? I'm going to go down here to details. We're going to add a whole bunch of sharpness. Okay, like so. Okay, so this is what looks like over sharpened. Okay, so when I say something is over sharpened, there's detail everywhere, there's sharpness everywhere, and your eye has nowhere to go. Okay, and even though this image was shot at a low ISO, I'm literally starting to see grain in the tree. Okay, so that's how much sharpness has brought out. Can you also see there's little outlines here around the leaves that are doing not such a good thing? See, okay, so there's like artifacting, and then the purple fringe, which is a little bit of chromatic aberration. Okay, so we can deal with that as well. So I'm going to scale this sharpening back. Use the masking slider, holding the Alt Option key. So masking, wherever you see white when you're holding this slider is where it's sharpening. Okay, and it's doing that partly because I've got these cranked up so high. So I'm going to bring these back down. Okay, it's an editing dance. There we go. Okay, so less on the sharpening scale. And then we want to deal with that chromatic aberration, which is under lens corrections. Okay, so I'm going to zoom back in again. So do you see this little purple fringe here? So that is chromatic aberration. Oops, hang on. Sorry, I'm supposed to mute myself, but I pressed the button on the wrong thing. So that is chromatic aberration around the edge. So that means that your camera or your lens hasn't focused all three colors, red, green, blue, at the same point. And it's most common in wide angle lenses and most common in on the edges of the image. So this indeed is a wide angle lens. So that's why we're seeing it. To fix it in Lightroom, it's super easy. Literally just click this checkbox. And now look, most of the purple is gone. If we still had a little bit, we could go into manual and do defringe down here using this little eyedropper. Okay, so if you put the eyedropper along the edge of something where you see a color, right, it'll take it away. So it took a little bit of blue there, okay? But you can see the difference, right? We've gotten rid of that purple fringe, and it will make your image look sharper as well. Okay, keep in mind we're zoomed into 300% there, okay? The other thing to keep in mind is a local edit versus a global edit. So global edit is the entire image, okay? So I'm actually going to undo clarity and texture on here because this is global. So that means the entire image. And I'm going to put it on as a local adjustment. You do that by using a mask. So in this case, I'm going to choose subject and see what it picks. Look at that. Okay, it picked the tree, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so we got lucky. If it didn't pick the tree, I would have used a radial mask and just drawn it. Now I can use the texture and clarity sliders in here. Okay, so watch the tree. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, watch the tree bark. Right, as I increase clarity and texture. Okay, so I can go quite high on this one. Now, I'm going to rename it Tree Bark. And then I'm going to use the same mask, but I'm going to duplicate it and invert it. So it's going to make me exactly the opposite mask. Okay. And I might even just subtract a little bit more. And I'm just going to say, okay, I want to make sure I'm not doing this on the actual tree itself. Okay. So I'm just subtracting like this. Okay, so I don't want this area. Okay, so where it's going to affect is everything that's red. And I'm going to take texture to the left and clarity ever so slightly to the left. Okay, let me zoom out. I can also take contrast and darkness. Okay, now see what happens as I'm doing this? Look what happens. The tree pops out. You see that? Doesn't have to go very extreme. I'm not making a huge edit, but what I am doing is making the tree stand out. Let me move this over here. There we go. Okay, if I turn the masks off, this is my this little pop-up box needs to go away, but it's my reminder to calibrate my screen. That's what it's doing. Okay, so no masks, masks. Okay, can you see the difference? Okay, so what I can do with this is make adjustments to the tree and to the background separately. Okay, and then as a final edit, I may put a little dark vignette on. So now I've gone really dramatic, and that was just a preset that I used to apply a dark vignette. Okay. Once again, I go back to the beginning because now it might be overall just a little bit dark. Something like that. So let's see the before and after. Okay. I would probably crop this in a little bit, but once we've done the editing, you know, there's this little bit of sky in here. Let's see what happens if I make it into a square, actually. I'm going to go square. And I like this tree here, but I want to get rid of this sort of gap. So I'm just going to crop in until I get rid of the gap. And let's just keep the tree something like that. Let's try that. Okay, so now you can see that we're really focused in on the tree bark and not all the other stuff. Right? If you're not sure where your eye is going, remember my upside down trick. Okay, you're going to have to find the upside down trick article, Rob, or video I did. I think it's a video. Look at your image upside down. Okay, if I undo the cropping and put it back where it was, okay, where does your eye go? Right. On the original, there's the original unedited image. Where does your eye go? Okay, goes all to the bright spots, right? Especially this big white area of the sky. After editing, it's better, goes to the tree, right? So that's the goal with your editing, is you want the subject to stand out, okay? The blue, David says, the blue gap really, oops, that's YouTube. Oops, where's David's comment? There we go. The blue sky gap really drew my eyes to it. Yeah, so that's why I wanted to get rid of it, because it was the brightest area and it was competing with the tree trunk. Okay, so the biggest thing here is think about getting closer when you're doing your photography. Focus in on the light and the texture coming across the tree, because here really, if I get into the heart of the matter, if I want to say, okay, where is my image here? If I keep the aspect ratio the same, but I flip it this way, I would say your image is up here somewhere. And I like the diagonal effect of the tree, so I might even make it more diagonal, something like that, right? But that's kind of where your image is. So when you're shooting a scene like this, especially if it's in your own yard, take lots of pictures, take lots of variations, some further away, some closer up, and just see what you can come up with. I'm trying to get back to my undo. There we go. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. All right, so I like to flip-flop over and go and do something in Luminar, and now we have Debbie. And is Lee here? I haven't seen Lee yet, but I know Debbie was here. Haven't seen Lee. Okay, Deb May is here. Okay, so I'm going to hop over to Luminar, and we're going to take a look at this one. So Rob has actually made a suggestion that I do one entire editing session just talking about cropping, because this is another example of where I'm going to talk about cropping, right? So I want to hear from you guys. Maybe do a poll, Rob. Can you do a quick poll and give them two options? Okay, so everybody is going to answer this except for the person that took it, except for Debbie. Okay, what is the subject here? Is it the water and the pond leaves? Is it the bridge? Or is it the trees? So 3 choices. Or how many options can they have in a poll, Rob? Or you could just put it in the chat. What's easier? What is the subject here? Is it the pond leaves? Or what do you call those? Lily pads? Is it the lily pads? Is it the bridge? Or is it the trees? Or is it something else? Is it a combination? Right. Ross says photography. Bridge. You're welcome, Shelley. I'm glad that was helpful. Bridge. Okay, so everybody so far is saying bridge. Okay. Does your eye go directly to it? And can we improve it with cropping? Right. Sheila says bridge. Mickey says combo. Okay, so let's take a look at cropping on this one. Okay, so there's a few things. Again, we're going to look at it upside down. So let me crop it, and then we're going to look at it upside down. Okay, now where does your eye go? Where does your eye go? Where is your eye drawn? Let me get me off the screen so you can just see the picture. Okay, where does your eye naturally go in this image? Sheila says sky at the bottom. Okay, so right now the sky's at the bottom. Mickey says the water. There's too much in front of the bridge. The pond with the lilies. Sky at the bottom. Okay, so the point though is it's not going to the bridge as much as you'd want. Okay, so if the bridge is the actual subject, we need to focus more on that, right? So your eye is going to different places. Okay, so now that we have, now that we have a direction, okay, so the upside down thing helps you figure out, okay, what am I going to do? What do I need to solve? Okay, so we said the sky is the problem. Can we just crop it? Let's see. I'm going to hit Composition AI in Luminar, and it's going to come in and give us a suggested crop. And when it does that, I find that the amount of crop is usually pretty good, but I just have to move it around a little bit. And in this case, I'm actually going to crop a little more. Notice there's also a dead tree over here, right? Do we want to keep that? I'm not sure yet, but I know I want to get rid of this sky, okay? So I'm going to crop in a little bit more to maybe about there, right? And then let's see if we get rid of that dead tree, right? So let's take a look at this crop and see how that feels. Okay, how does that feel now? It feels more like the pond and the bridge, right? Right? Do you agree? Definitely we've solved the problem with that sky, right? Trish says she'd like to see the lily pads as the focus. The rock bump thing is kind of white. Yes, right here. Yeah. So all things that we can solve. This is also really bright. So a lot of this can be solved with a simple vignette, right? Which we haven't done. We haven't done any editing yet. Okay, so let's just do the quick edit. Okay, so we're going to develop raw, and let's just choose landscape. Okay, so camera profile, remember, that's where you will find the camera profile in Luminar. It has to be developed raw. You have to have shot raw. Okay, if you shot JPEG, you won't get this option. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. We don't have the shift double click trick, but we do have curves and we do have clipping warnings. So Rob, you need to share the keyboard shortcuts for Luminar. So I'm just tucking the histogram in a little bit by grabbing the edges of this curve, okay? So the curve and the histogram are shown here, and it matches here, okay? So the curve is how you can adjust the contrast. And I'm going to bring the highlights down. So that's going to bring the highlights down in the water especially. But I'm going to deal with that another way also, okay? Other than that, the contrast looks good. I think that the color looks good. If anything, I'm going to warm it up a little bit more, like so. Okay, see how much more yellow that has? Big difference. And then play with this slider a little bit as well, because if you go more to the green, you start to get the trees losing their color. See that? You go too far and the bridge is now green. So I'm going to put this back where it was, because it was actually pretty good. So I'm not going to mess with that one too much, okay? And notice I've not touched saturation and vibrance, because when you have proper contrast using these other tools, okay, so I've got some black clipping, just like I did in the Lightroom. So where you see these blue areas, that means that the blacks are clipping, okay? I'm not clipping anything on the whites, but just making these adjustments, look at the difference. Okay, and I have not touched the saturation slider, because when you use the camera profile and increase your blacks correctly, you don't need to touch saturation. Okay, so that's developed. Now, if we have issues with chromatic aberration, that's where you'll find it here in Lightroom or Luminar. Let me zoom in. Let me zoom in even further. Oops. Okay, so we're at 400%. Where's the sky? If we're going to see any chromatic aberration, it's going to appear up here. Maybe a tiny, oh, I can see a tiny bit of purple there. Okay, it's out of focus, but let's just check off chromatic aberration. And sometimes when you pull down the highlights, I'm seeing a little bit there as well, you'll get what's called a fringe. There, can you see that? Okay, watch when I click off defringe. See how it removed that color? Okay, there's a blue color. So when you adjust the sky to be darker and I lowered the highlights, sometimes you get this fringe of color appearing. So always make sure you double check that and zoom in so that you see it. Okay. So we fixed those things. And I think we're pretty good on the rest here. Okay, so now once we've done develop raw, I'm going to do a vignette. And here's my vignette trick, right? So if you haven't seen this before, darken it, change the feather to 0 so you can see the edge. I'm going to make it the size and the shape that I want. And then I'm going to select the subject. So in this case, I want to darken more of the water and keep the bridge is the main subject. Okay, so something like that. So that's the area that I want to affect. And I'm going to darken this in the process as well. So possibly even over a little bit. So I'm darkening this little log over here. Okay. Then I can just put the feather back up and adjust the amount. So I use that as a trick to get positioning and size. Okay. Can you see what that's doing? Again, bringing the focus in to the bridge by adjusting the darkness. Okay, so your eye is naturally going to be drawn in because of that darkness. Okay. Another one that we can use is to get focus on the bridge is enhance the structure and the detail, but we can go the opposite way, right? And if I want to darken the pond, there's a couple of different ways we can do that. So I'm going to show you I'm going to show you 2 different ways. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to go structure. So let's do positive structure and a little boost. And if we want to see what that's doing, okay. So this is kind of like clarity in Lightroom. See that? Okay. So boost, but we only want this to happen around the bridge. So I'm just going to use a radial gradient and create a shape. Okay, so keep in mind when you do a gradient like this, right, wherever it's red is where it's going to apply. So I need to invert it, right? So it's going to apply on the inside of where I'm drawing it. Okay, so I want the texture there, okay? And while I'm here, I'm going to copy this mask, okay? So under mask actions. Okay, then I'm going to close it and open it again. And this time I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to blur. Okay, I'm going to the 100th degree here, paste in that mask, okay, and then invert it. So now it's blurring the outside part. Okay, so I'm sharpening inside, blurring outside. Okay, and of course I need to scale it back because that's too much. Okay, now if you want to see what I've done, well, let me go back to the vignette here. Right, so that's before the structure. It's subtle, but you can see that it's softening the edges, right? While bringing focus into the bridge. The next thing I like to do is like you can use a dodge and burn tool if you want to darken the bits of the pond, or I find it much simpler to use develop. And I'm just going to bring the highlights down, the contrast down. Okay, so my exposure down. I want to darken these light areas. Okay, and I'm just going to mask it in. Well, this time I want it on the bottom part of the image, so I'm just going to use a linear gradient. So this one allows you to drag from the edge, in this case, the bottom. And I'm going to darken all the way up to here. Okay, so it's applying on this bottom. Right, now you can see what it's doing, right? And now I can just adjust it accordingly. Right? See what it's doing? So it's really putting that focus away from the lily pad. Okay. Big difference. Okay. Now, what if I wanted to get that tree in there as well? I could go back into that develop tool. We still have the ability to mask it. And I could just say, oh, now I want a brush. And I'm just going to paint it in over that tree as well. And somebody mentioned this rock earlier. So I'm just going to do the rock, the slightly lower opacity. Okay, so I just paint it at 30%. And maybe even this one over here. Okay, so any of these little spots that I want to darken, I can just paint them in real quick. Like so. Okay. So there we are, before and after. Okay. I feel like it's a little bit crooked still. I feel like the bridge is tilting. There, that's better. Make sure that your verticals are straight. Okay. There we go. So before and after. Okay, so now we've made the bridge stand out. Any questions? Too much foreground. See, the other thing that I thought of as well, David, is to crop this one into more of a panorama. So you're not stuck with the original aspect ratio or the shape that the camera photographed. We could go into freeform and then just make it into more of a panorama. Oops, move it over a little bit. Okay, so too much foreground. When you have a lot of foreground like that, it feels like the subject is really far away, right? Let's try something like that. How's that? Better, David? Good? Somebody sees an upside down tree in the water. Am I missing the upside down tree? Oh, over here. Here, there's a reflection of this bush. Okay. Now, scenes like this are really pretty, and look at the greens. Remember, I said I was going to show you another way to darken the pond. I'm going to do that. But because there's lots of green in here, there's a couple of tools you can use to get some variations in the greens. So we could go to the color tool and go down to HSL and luminance. So luminance is brightness. And then play with the yellow and the green, because you'll see what happens. There's lots of green in here, but there's also lots of yellow in here. Okay. So I'm going to brighten the yellow while simultaneously darkening the green. Okay, can you see what that's doing? Let me just turn it off. See how it's created a little more contrast within the leaves themselves, okay? So that's a little trick I like to use. Or we could brighten the green and darken the yellow, but it doesn't work as well. Generally, I use yellow brighter, green darker, okay? Like so. We can see if there's any orange in there. Oh, yeah, see, look at, there's some orange in that bush. Right? We can also shift the color by going to hue. So if you want this to turn into more of a fall scene, look what happens. We can literally make it fall. How crazy is that? Okay, so I'm shifting the hue of the yellows and the greens. Okay, I might actually shift it a little bit like that. I kind of like the yellows being a bit orange. How about that? Okay, so see the difference here that this color tool is making? We're just creating some variations of tones within the trees. So it's not all just the same green, okay? The other tool that you can use to do that is color harmony. I have it in my favorites, but normally you'll find it down here under professional. Okay, so color harmony, and this first one, color contrast. Well, I guess it's the second one. Okay, so drag the amount up. I usually just bring it up to about 30. And then as you change the hue slider, it's going to affect different parts of the image. Okay, so wherever your slider lands, It's going to increase the contrast and brighten that color and darken the opposite. So in this case, yellow-green, right? So see how that's working? So similar to what we did with the other tool, you can do here as well. Be really careful with this one because you can create what I call, of course, neon puke, right? So we need to avoid the neon puke. And yes, we're working on some t-shirts for that, right? The other tool, there's another tool that you can use to enhance landscape images. Go figure, the landscape tool, right? Landscape tool, okay? The landscape tool has basically these two sliders that are really advantageous for landscapes. Foliage enhancer. I actually prefer using the other two tools that I just used because you have a bit more control with them. Foliage enhancer goes crazy, right? And especially if you go too far and it makes the greens kind of really bluish neon. And I, you know, I'm not a fan. I always drag this one to minus 30 to 32 because the greens are just too blue otherwise, right? So be very, very subtle on this one. I almost never go past about 10 if I'm using this one, right? And then the golden hour gives you more yellow as well. But once again, you can't really control the tint of it or the amount of saturation. So I tend to use color tool and the color contrast. Okay. But let's see where we're at. Okay. Before and after. Can you see the difference in the leaves now? Really punches, right? And the final way I'm going to show you how to darken the pond, and it's not the dodge and burn tool. It's using a layer. So we want to duplicate the layer. And you can do that by right-clicking on it or literally just press D on your keyboard. And it makes a duplicate layer, okay, exactly the same with all the same edits, okay? So that's the neat thing. So you can actually change the edits, okay? But if you change the blend mode to multiply, it darkens everything. Okay, so it's adding the density from one layer to the other layer. So then you can dial it down in terms of opacity, right? So look at the punchiness it's adding. Okay, so we're getting some real punchiness here. And then, of course, you can mask it. Okay, so if I don't want it on the middle, I can once again make a radial gradient in the middle. Oops, I keep grabbing the wrong thing. Right? So now it's going to affect the outer part of the image, not the inner part. Remember, so that's what we want. Okay? So now look what it's doing. So it's literally an edge vignette. Right? But instead of toning it in a way that looks fake, I love this duplicate layer, multiply blend mode for darkening and doing sort of a custom vignette. So there's our before and after. I might be inclined to come in and do a bit of erasing. And I would do that on the bottom layer before I duplicate it, just to clone out some of these little spots. And I might do some work on that log to tone it down even more. So as Rob has said, please give us a thumbs up on this video if you're watching and you're getting some value out of this today. And remember to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share the video with everybody you know that likes photography. They can help them learn to do their landscape editing as well. And come join us next time, right? All right, let's go. Let's go do another one. Okay, so how's our before and edit? How's our before and after on that one? Look at the difference in the colors, right? Amazing. I think this one's a little too dark, so we'll just scale it back. Right? So I just wanted to show you different techniques of ways that you can enhance and bring out those green colors, right? Let's go back to Lightroom. And let's see, who else is here? You're most welcome, Debbie. That was a fantastic image. It was really great. Thank you for submitting that. Trish, good thing with Luminar is you can mask the color. Yes, exactly. In Lightroom, you cannot mask the HSL tool. So that's something that is a huge advantage of Luminar. The trees, for me, not so much on the lily pads. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Oh, a mystical. Okay, mystical. I didn't do mystical. Yeah, good call. How did I create the gold tint in the trees? Okay, let me go back there. I missed your guys' questions. Okay, so yes, I might do mystical. How I created the gold tint in the trees was the color tool, Marguerite. So I went in here and I adjusted the hue a little bit and also the luminance. Make me bigger. Yes, there we go. So I went in and adjusted the hue and the luminance using the color tool. So if I turn it off, oops, it's going to take a minute for Luminar to catch up. Right. And Rob is reminding, yes, share this video and our channel with your camera club members as well. Let me just give it a minute. But that's the tool that I used, Marguerite, to create the difference in the colored leaves. Right. It doesn't want to do me a before and after now. And then I also created more contrast with color harmony. Let's see if I can catch up here. I'll give it a minute. I'm going to come back and I'll show you what I did with color in here. Take a look at the original, right? There's our original, right? Big difference, okay? So I didn't crop a whole lot out of here, but we went more panorama, right? Still not loading. Let's just go back down here. Okay. Next. Let's see. AJ, is AJ here? I haven't seen him. Deb's here. Okay, perfect. All right, so I actually already edited this image of Deb's. And I know she's in Alaska, so she's got lots of mountains to work with, mountain scenes, okay? So that's kind of what I created out of it using Lightroom, okay? And you can do similar things with Luminar. And I want to show you how I did that, okay? So there's only a tiny little crop there. If I did erase the branches, how would I do that? Okay, so we're still back on this one. For some reason, it's not letting me show you the before and after of that tool. But how would I do the branches, she says? I don't know that I would erase them completely, but I would probably just actually use the clone tool set to maybe 35 or 40%. And let me just get a smaller brush. And so I'm going to clone from a darker area and just sort of clone over the bright areas. And it can be totally random. Okay, what's my brush doing? There we go. Okay, so I'm literally just cloning from the green down into there. Right? So it just blends a little better. And I'm doing that at 37%. Okay. Let's see if it's doing anything. I'm not sure if it's caught up to me yet. Let's wait for Luminar to catch up. I'm just going to leave it there. But that's what I would do to darken that tree. I would use the clone tool at a lower opacity. Okay. Where's Bigfoot, Rob? Bigfoot. Okay, so I'm going to go a little faster on this one because we've learned the steps already. I'm going to change the camera profile. Do we want landscape, neutral, portrait, standard? I believe I actually use standard in this one. I generally almost never use the vivid or the vibrant ones because I want to be able to control the contrast and the color myself. So I believe I actually started with standard. Let me just cheat, have a look. Oh, I used portrait. Look at that. I actually used portrait. Okay. So I used portrait as opposed to landscape. And I did that because I didn't want the deep colors. Okay. So I didn't want it as contrasty. Okay. So camera profile first. Okay. I'm doing a shift, double click. I'm going to do a little bit of clarity overall. And I also warmed it up a little bit. Give it a little bit more warmth, like so. And then I just kind of play with the magenta slider. I increased it a little bit, you know, the purple mountains thing, right? And from here, I want to do some, we can do our lens corrections the same, make sure that we've got these things checked off, right? And for Fuji, it does this automatically with a camera profile, so you don't have to do that. If you don't want the camera profile, it's correcting sort of a distortion thing. Usually what I'll do is I'll just turn the distortion off because you're using a longer lens and you actually want that lens distortion. So I'll put the profile on. It should find your lens, but it'll correct for any lens vignetting, right? So it's kind of a happy medium. I did a little bit of a crop on this one, not very much. I think I came in about there, and I want to keep the sky. I just wanted a little bit less of the land, okay? Because when we're talking about visual mass, I mentioned this before. Rob, if you want to please find that article. Visual mass is what takes up the most space in your image, okay? It's going to feel the heaviest, okay? So right now, this whole area of green takes up more than a third. Like the bottom third is green, and then this part and this part, okay? And then the top third is sky. So the mountains, which should be the focus and the subject, are taking up the least visual mass. So I want to crop out some of the green, okay, like so. And we're going to work on the sky to darken it and the green to darken it as well, okay? So once again, I don't want to do a whole lot of clarity. See, now you can see the difference, okay? So I don't want to do a whole lot of clarity and texture globally because it affects the land, okay? So when we look at this one upside down, okay, look at the difference, right? We've got texture everywhere. So your eye is drawn to 4 things in the image. Let me find my little note here, right? So your eye is drawn to these 4 things: brightness, sharpness, color, and contrast. When they're everywhere in the image, your eye struggles to find one thing. Okay, so now that we've looked at it upside down again, we want to figure out, well, how do we get the eye to focus on the mountain? Okay, so look at the mountain. That looks amazing, right? So let's undo this. The other thing that happens when you do lots of texture and clarity in the sky is you'll usually start to get some noise, okay? So I'm going to undo these. Excuse me for the cough. All right, where's my cursor? I lost my cursor. Okay, so now I want to darken. There's 3 steps, right? There's 3 pieces of this image. I want to work on the sky. So let's just select sky. And I want to bring it a little bit darker. But I'm actually going to try dehaze on this one. Ooh, look at that. Look how dramatic that gets, right? So I'm going to go a little ways on that. And check my clipping. Let's put this guy back in the corner. There's nothing clipping, but if I bring the highlights down, you can see that the sky gets more dramatic and darker. So I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. Something like that, okay? Now, while I'm in here, if I want to shift the sky color, right, it's fairly purple right now. I can take some magenta out. I can add some yellow or make it bluer, okay? So if we make it slightly bluer, when we make the mountains a bit more yellow, they'll stand out more as well because warmer colors stand out against cooler colors, okay? So rename sky. Okay, now I want to affect just the grass. So what is the best way, do you think, for me to do that? Actually, let's do the mountains next. So I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to go select subject and cross my fingers that it picks the mountains. Okay, it did pretty good. It missed this part right here. Okay, so I'm going to add, and I'm going to use the object option, and then you can either draw a square or just paint around the thing you want to select. Okay, so you don't even have to be perfect. Just get the outline, and voila. Okay, so now I've got the mountains. Looks like I missed a little spot there. Okay, so I'm just going to go brush. I just want to make sure I've got all the bits. There we go. Now that I've got it selected, what do I want to do to the mountains? Well, we know that a minute ago, adding texture and clarity really made them stand out. So look at that. Okay, big difference. We can also warm it up so that the mountain looks more brownish as opposed to blue. Okay, also big difference. And we can use the clipping warnings to tell me if we've got anything clipping. And right now we don't have anything clipping. Oh, there we go. So let's get a little bit of black clipping, and looks like just this glacier up here is clipping on the white side. So we'll keep that in line. Something like that. Okay. So now we're going to call this mountains. Okay. Now we need to select the green. Okay. So if I do select and invert here, or duplicate and invert, I'll get the sky and the green. So I'm kind of just using my head as to, okay, and I can see that I missed part of that mountain right there in that one. But I'm using my head as to, how can I make this work? Okay. So I can just say, well, now I've got everything I want, except I don't want the sky. So I'm just going to unselect the sky. Right. And I'm going to use another brush just to make sure that there's nothing here in the mountains. It looks like I've got the edge of the mountains. So I don't want to have this part of the mountain selected. So I'm just looking at where the mask is red, making sure that I don't have mountains. And I could go fix that other one as well. But for the most part, I've got the valley now. Okay. So once I've got the valley selected, what do I want to do to it? Okay. So I want it to be less contrasty. So I'm going to bring the highlights down and the shadows up. I'm going to bring the texture down a little bit, clarity down a little bit, even dehaze. So look what happens when you do dehaze. Increases it, gives you more contrast and color. A decrease flattens it out a bit, okay? So then I can darken the whole thing. So like the valley is in shade a bit more, right? So now I can rename it Valley. And let's see what it's doing. It's subtle, right? It's subtle, but it's definitely darkening, okay? Darkening and lowering the contrast, right? If I want to see what all the masks are doing, okay, no masks, masks. You see the difference? Big difference, right? Okay, so there's a before and after. And then I might just do a regular vignette on there. Now let's see how close I got to my other edit. I think I made the other one a little bit warmer overall, something like that. Let's see. So here's the edit I just did. And this is the one I did earlier. So yeah, it's warmer. Okay, so I used 6500 on the white scale there, and this one's not quite as warm. All right, let me just bring up the warmth a little bit. Okay, let's see how close I got. Pretty close. Slightly different edit. I made the sky bluer in the second edit, which is on the left, right? And I actually think that's an improvement. The valley's a little bit darker as well, but the mountains look pretty similar. Okay? And the whole idea is that we want the eye to go right to those mountains, right? And when we look at them, when we look at the original, okay, if I do the before and after, let me just do lights out here. No. Okay, so there's the before. Remember, I cropped a little bit from the right and from the bottom and after. Okay, so I've used the masking tool and selective or local editing to create the look so that your eye comes right in on the mountains and the other parts are secondary. I'm kind of torn on whether or not to leave that blue sky. What do you guys think? Should I crop the sky, that blue sky out or not? Because I kind of almost want just the clouds. No, I don't want to do that. Thank you very much. Okay, let's try the cropping. Let's see what happens if I crop that out. I could go a little more panoramic on this one too. That's good also, right? So just getting rid of that pop of color. Because remember those four things that grab your attention, right? Contrast. We didn't want contrast everywhere. Sharpness. We didn't want sharpness everywhere. Bright colors. Okay. So there was that blue up there that was just grabbing my attention. Right. So we crop it out. Right. There's your nice print. Thank you so much, Debbie. That's wonderful. Do you have what's your preferred editor? Yours was which was your preferred editor again? Neo. So have you looked into some of our other Neo videos and also our Luminar Neo course? If you haven't seen that, we have a full course on Luminar Neo. If you'd like to share that as well, please, Rob. Quentin, it's wonderful to watch somebody who knows what they're doing demonstrating their craft. Oh, thanks so much. That's really nice of you to say. But the other nice thing, the other beautiful thing is here, this is not my image. Look at this image that Deb sent. This is a fabulous image, right? So I've got some really great raw material to work with, not just raw images. Okay, I'm going to go back to the other swamp image because Ross Photography says, for backwater scenes, I love the dead trees. I didn't mind it either. You know, I toned it down a little bit, but I didn't mind it either. Okay, let me see. Okay, now we've got a before and after. Oh, I know what's happening. I'm editing the wrong layer. I'm just going to remove this layer. There we go. Okay, now I can go back here and show you what I did. Okay, so this is the question that Margarita asked is how did I affect the color? Okay, so that was before the color tool, and that's after. Okay, so I really did a lot there with the color tool and then also with color harmony. So those two tools, Marguerite. Okay. So color itself and color harmony. Somebody else asked about, oh, I cloned on the wrong layer. That's why it wasn't working because I was cloning on the, see, you have to be careful what layer you're on. Okay, so I was cloning to try and lower the brightness of that tree and it wasn't doing anything because I was on the wrong layer because that layer was only at like 12% opacity, right? So it's not going to do very much when I'm not painting with its full opacity. So I would do something like that. See how that's just minimizing it without removing it, okay? So I just minimized it. And then the other thing somebody suggested was a little bit of mystical. Yes, we can do mystical because it is kind of a really lovely mystical scene, right? I kind of like that one, dreamy. Absolutely. And if you want it dreamy, right, you can always just go crazy with it and then remove it a little bit from the bridge. Okay, so erase a little bit off of this section. Okay. So we go a little more dreamy. Okay, so there we go, mystical. That's another great way. I use mine as structure, but you could use mystical and paint it in around the edges to get that softness around the edges as well. That image would look great hanging on the wall. Well, there you go. I believe that was Debbie's image. So there you go. Print it up. Follow that and print it up. It is indeed enchanted. I love it. Let's see. How are we doing? Rob says there's a poll on the screen. So please answer the poll on the screen now. Do you subscribe to our channel? Are you a current YouTube subscriber of Digital Photo Mentor? Or are you just visiting? We would love to know. And if you are just visiting, do come and subscribe. Come and hang out with us more often. Okay, I do this once a week. We're probably going to switch over to weekends again soon. But for now, into the fall, we're still doing a Wednesday at 6 o'clock Mountain Time, which is 8 o'clock in New York time. I think late at night in Europe and early morning down under in New Zealand, Australia. Okay, let's see if I have time for one more. Oh, yes, I wanted to do this one of Deb's, actually. Is that yours as well, Deb? Let me just go back in here. I might save that one. Oh no, that's Kelly's. Okay, I wanted to do this one of Kelly's because what I did was once again worked on this one in cropping. Right. So let me get back to my screen here. Marguerite says I'm getting more confident taking images from Lightroom to Luminar. Awesome. And I could certainly do that with some of these as well. Actually, I might do it with this one because she said she uses both. So that might be a good option for this one, just so you guys can see that. So that's a good point, Marguerite. Let me just check my listing here. Yep, that's a green one. Okay, so I'm not going to show you what I already did with this image because I did some stuff. Okay, so once again, cropping is going to be key. Where your eye goes, and she indicated that she did a sky replacement. So, and wanted to know about the workflow for doing that. So, if you use both, like I do and like Kelly does, I would do my basic edits like this in Lightroom first. Then I would take it over to Luminar to do the sky replacement. Now you can do a sky replacement in Photoshop too, but I actually prefer Luminar. Plus, there's some other tools there, like we've seen, like the color tool, that is great for enhancing the colors and masking them like you can't do in Lightroom, right? The thing is, you can do anything in Photoshop, but you have to know how to do it. And it takes more skill, more time, and the learning curve is like straight up. Okay. All right. Thanks so much. All right. Awesome. Thank you, Debbie. That means a lot. Rocked your world tonight. Thank you. We're having fun. We went camping yesterday. And I'm going to come back on camera here because when we were bringing stuff in from our truck, we found a random knob. We found a random knob in the trunk, and I got to figure out where it goes. It looks like a tripod leg, something or other. So I got to figure out where did this thing come from. It twisted off somewhere. So I got to go look at all my tripods, and yes, I have more than one, and see if one is missing a whatever that's called, spigot. I don't even know. Okay, so questions for you guys. We're gonna look at this one upside down again. Okay, where does your eye go? I'm gonna take myself off the screen so you can just see the image. Where does your eye go? Any thoughts? For me, it definitely goes to the tree. Yes, the smoke is way better here, Sheila. Thank you. Okay, Ross says the tree. Anyone else? Aha. Raymond says the road. Deb says the sky. David says the road. Shelly says the path. Okay, so there's lots of stuff grabbing our attention, right? So we probably want our eye to go to the tree, right? And follow the road. So all of those are great answers except sky. We don't want our eye going to the sky, right? So let me come back on here. All right, so let me get back here and turn it right side up again. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is again cropping. And if we think about composition and how our eyes, how we read things, okay? In our society, we speak English, or we all speak English as our main language that we're speaking right now. And I got to do this right now. Okay, so your eyes go from top to bottom, left to right. Wait, is that left? Am I left? Is this left on the screen? This is left. So your eyes come in, right? And follow from the left to the right. So which way is this path going? It's going right to left. It's going left to right. It's going left to right. It's going left to right, but it's going out of the picture because your eyes go left to right. Do you follow me? Okay, bear with me here. Okay, so your eyes go left to right. So what happens if we flip it? Okay, and you have the ability to do that in Lightroom. Okay, so it's photo, flip horizontal. Now the road is coming into the picture instead of going out of the picture. Okay, so your eyes read left to right. You want your subject to be towards the right, not the left. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the cropping. Okay, so we've got a lot of sky that is blank. Again, a lot of foreground. Now I'm going to come in closer. We may end up with some kind of a panorama thing again, right? I'm not worried about how the aspect ratio is. I'm just focused on the image. See how there's a bright section of the land down here? I'm going to come into the shadow. I want to keep the right because I want to keep the clouds. I want to get rid of some of the sky. So we're kind of putting that horizon on this line here. And I feel like I want less road, a little bit less road, maybe something like that, right? Right? Can you see the difference already? Now I'm going to go through the steps fairly quickly. I'm going to do landscape, profile, blacks and whites. We're going to do a little bit of contrast. Definitely I'm going to adjust the color. Let's just go with daylight, and then adjust it a little bit less pink. And I worked on the color again. So luminance, green, darker, okay, yellow, a little brighter. Now you can see why I cropped out that bottom area, right? Darken the blue. And I tend to like to bring the saturation of the sky down as well as the yellow. Okay, I don't want to have too much yellow. And I might shift them a little bit this way. How's our blue looking? Okay, so before and after. So it's already brought out the sky. Okay. Next, oh, do I have masks on here? No. Let me check the highlights again. We check a little bit more on this blacks. So even if I go really far with the black, if I want more contrast, the best way is to go into the tone curve, right? So I can go further with the tone curve than I can with the black slider. Okay? I can also darken the exposure overall, like so. And then we can get into individual masking again. Okay, so I can do the sky. But if I'm going to do a sky replacement, it kind of doesn't make any sense. So I'm still debating as to whether or not I'm going to do a sky replacement. So I'm going to edit it and then make my decision. Okay, so I want to darken it for sure, okay, but not too far. Because if you go crazy, it looks obvious, right? So darken it. And I feel like the color is still a bit wonky. I'm not sure what color I want it to be. That looks a little better, I think. Okay. I think there's a spot in the sky. Maybe a little less pink. And remember, if we add black, you get more color. Okay. Same thing with dehaze. If you increase the dehaze, right? So now you can see the spots. So I'm actually going to leave it like that for a moment, okay, just so that I can see the spots. And I'm going to get rid of these spots here. So there's some gunky things on the sensor here that's causing that. Now this one actually is a cloud, but it looks like a spot, so I'm going to get rid of it, right? And I think there's one over here. So I'm just doing that real quickly. And then I can go back to the mask. So I used that dehaze slider to tell me where the spots were and then just put it back, right? So I'm not entirely sure that I would change the sky here, right? Because it's simple and it's effective, right? So already, let's see a before. So it was very flat and after, right? Now, if we want to change the sky, we can also do the things we did before, check the lens corrections, make sure the chromatic aberration is checked off, and so on, right? So maybe I want that distortion back. And, oh, why is my mask telling me? Tells me I need to update my mask. So whenever you see a little red dot here, it means that something that you've done as an automated mask or an AI needs updating. Okay, so if you see a little red dot, open your mask and check for that. Okay, All right, so now let's say we're done with the Lightroom edit. And let's just see what I did with this image earlier to see how close I got on this one. Okay, pretty close. I did a little bit different color on this one and cropped in a little bit tighter, but you get the idea. It was pretty close. Okay, and the same thing applied. I kind of like this color better. I'm gonna go with this edit actually. Let's go with this edit, right? So if we want to continue from here, let me show you what else I did on this edit. Oh, see, it's got a red one, so I need to update it again. So I got to go to Sky, Update. So it had a red dot. And what I did on this one was I did a mask on the tree area, and I increased the texture and clarity. And then I did an inverted one on the outer part, just to darken that area a little bit. Okay, so I kind of made a custom vignette, like so. Right? So before, right, I need a before in my history panel. Okay, so from here, if we do want to change the sky, we have two options. We can go directly to Luminar by choosing Edit In and choosing Luminar, okay? But if there's more stuff that you think you're going to want to do, or if you think that you want to change the sky and then come back later and change it to a different sky, then I would recommend doing this instead, okay? So we're going to open as a smart object in Photoshop, okay? So Marguerite said, can the image be flipped horizontally? Yes. Oh, now it's gone to Photoshop beta. I got to change that. It keeps opening from Lightroom to Photoshop beta because that's in my preferences. I need to change that. So yes, we can flip it, and I did flip it. Let's see. You like the sky. Rob likes the sky. I like the sky the way it is as well, right? I don't think it's bad, and it's the whole image is about simplicity, right? This whole image. I lost my mouse. Whoa. There we go. Okay. All right, there we go. Okay, so now we are in Photoshop over here. This is Photoshop beta, so it does have the generative AI things. So because it's Photoshop beta and generative AI, we could literally just select the sky and say, make a new sky. But we're not going to cheat. We're gonna go into Luminar. So let me get where's my layers? There we go. Okay, so this layer is a smart object. You can tell because of this little guy right here, this little logo or icon. And whatever I do on this layer, it's going to save it and remember it, but it's what's called non-destructive editing. Okay, so from here, I'm going to open, oops, I got to select the layer. From here, I'm going to open Luminar Neo. Okay, so it's an extra step. Instead of going directly from Lightroom to Luminar Neo, I'm going to Photoshop first as a layer and then going to Neo. Okay, so now that I'm here, we can go and find a sky. Okay. Yeah, Rob says that I have eagle eyes. I see things that other people don't see. I'm going to go into my sky pack number 1. Now, there's lots of sky packs that you can get from the Skyline Marketplace, but of course, we have some as well. So if you could please share our ultimate sky pack. We've got 2 different sky packs available, and this first one has sort of some general skies, and my second sky pack has some night skies like aurora and some blue hour shots, as well as some storm clouds, right? So if you'd like to add some aurora to your images, check that one out. Okay, so let's see, what kind of sky can we put in here? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the wrong kind of sky. So what is the wrong kind of sky? The sky that you put in must match your image. By that, I mean it has to match the direction of light and make sense, okay? So take a look at this image here. The light, there's something creating a giant shadow here. So there's probably a bank of trees over on that left side, right? Well, it was right because we flipped it, okay? So the light is coming from over there, right? But if we put this like this, does that make sense? Because where is the light coming from in the new sky? We need to global that. Right? Where's the light coming from in the new sky? Over there on the right. Okay, so they don't match. Doesn't make sense. Okay. Same thing as if I put a night sky in here, it wouldn't make sense either. Okay. There's a rainbow. Looks like you can buy a rainbow. Even if I put something like this one, which has got the sky, the sun, okay, it doesn't make sense because the sky is clearly right. The sun is clearly right here. The shadows will be coming this way, right? So the light direction matters. So we need a sky that does not have the sun in it, okay? First hint. So let's take a look at some of these. Do we have any that have indirect sun? I'm just going to go to Skylums, like a blue sky. Okay, so this is something that it was like the one it was suggested, right? Here's the one that it was suggesting, right? Something like that. Okay, so that's not so bad. It's a little bit bright on this side. So I think I'm just going to flip it because we want the light coming from that side, right? And then we can align it. Okay, so if I want to adjust the sky, see how that original sky is still there? We got to make sure that we cover it. Okay, so I want to get down far enough. Okay, make sure that it's below the horizon for sure. Okay. And I need to cover those. Okay, so when I go with the global, that's going to help. Okay, so increasing the global slider. Close gaps is the opposite. It brings back those other clouds. So I'm going to go this way. Let's see. Global is generally the best way. And if I had removed those clouds, right, before, that would have made the sky replacement easier. So you can still kind of see that one there, but it's not so bad, right? That kind of works, right? Atmospheric haze, when you increase this one, it takes away some of the contrast in the sky, right? So I'm just going to darken it a little bit. I can make it bluer or give it a bit more warmth. That's actually not bad. I mean, it kind of feels like some yellow is picking up in there. Okay. How about something like that? Now, the problem with the sky, though, with the change sky, is that we're now adding another element that's bright to take away from, is the road and the tree our subject, right? So be very careful of, when you change a sky, that you make one that isn't doing the opposite of what you're trying to do, okay? You can still see that underlying clouds there. That one's not too bad, right? That one's not too bad. Maybe give it a little more punch. Okay. Something like that. This one is better. And if we defocus it, right, maybe even just one, if we defocus it, it's going to help take up the effect, what's the word I'm looking for? Your eye away from the sky. Okay? Because if we put a big bold sunset in there, right, we've completely taken your eye away from it. And the original clouds actually bring your eye over to that corner where we want them to be, right? Once you add a sky, right, you can use the Enhance AI tool and the Sky Enhancer, and it will affect your new sky, okay? So we can affect it that way. And we can also use the color tool, just like we did before, to affect either the hue. Okay, that's a little better color. And darken it. But you see how it's like, I don't know. It's just not, I'm not crazy about it, to be honest. The sky's not doing it for me. So I would probably just leave it. Right? Remember your relight. Okay, so relight adds some of the sky color into the image. So what are our thoughts here? I'm just going to do a before and after here. Original sky, sky replacement. I'm not convinced that's even the best sky replacement yet. But original sky or sky replacement? What do you guys think? Tell me in the chat. Let's see if there's another one here. Let's see. See, we don't want a dramatic sky. I don't want something like this. And please, whatever you do, don't use the one that everybody uses. It's like the same sunset. This one. Please don't use this one. You see this in a million Luminar things. Don't use that one ever. It's a great sky, but I'm going to go to clear skies, actually. Let's go to California clear skies and try just a blue sky. Okay, so we're kind of getting rid of the cloud now. Aha, relight fixes that. Saw a problem there. There we go. So do we want just a clear sky? Right, so what are the thoughts? Original, 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 original. Everybody says original. Like the new sky, but not the robin's egg. What if I do one that's got a little bit of orange in it? Yeah, see, that doesn't work, does it? No, I like the one. The one that we had was actually not too bad. And where was that? Was it this one? Okay, so not robin's egg. What color do we want? More of this color? More like that? Something like that. Let's try that one. Okay, so now, and I haven't got the masking perfect in here because I can see there's some issues around the edge of the tree here. Okay, so when you're doing your sky replacement, you definitely want to check the mask. There, closing gaps. See that? Solving some of these problems. And part of the problem is that it's got these clouds in the background, the original image, that it's trying to write over, right? So it's got extra work to do. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that. I would play with the masking a little bit more, but I'm going to save this one. We could also try the color harmony tool. I didn't try that one yet. Okay, so we could say, okay, we want the blue darkened, or do we want to work on the green and the yellow? Right, so see what that does. It gives us more enhancement in the field. And then maybe we want my little, where's my, I need to put mystical back in my favorites because I'm always using it and I took it out of my favorites. So there's mystical. There we go. So then when we apply it, when you click apply, it's going to bring it back to where? Where's it going to bring it back to? Photoshop. Okay, let's see what Quentin said. Original sky, I like the simplicity of it. Yeah, me too. Original with the original clouds. Quentin, I'm grateful I'm not yet experienced enough to recognize specific skies people are reusing. Well, the thing is, when you use Luminar Neo a lot and you're in these Luminar Neo groups on Facebook, you start to see the same thing. Like when the Studio Light tool came out, everybody started posting faces with stripes across them. And that's not how I would use the Studio Light tool at all. That's not how I recommend it. Right. I'm the same, Ross, but I will do it and keep it subtle, right? That you might not even know. Yes, you're right, Marty. We went back to Photoshop. Okay, so now here we are back in Photoshop. And I didn't do the best job of masking around there, but now you can see that Luminar Neo is applied as a layer. So all I need to do is do save. Remember, save, not save as, save, and then close. And when I close it, it's going to take me back to Lightroom. Actually, after I save it, it's going to take me back to Lightroom. So So let's go back in here, and it should pop in right next to these ones here. What have I got sorted by? Okay, so it should come in next to this one. Okay, but I agree. I like the original sky because it goes with the simplicity of the image. It reminds me of the Microsoft background, the Windows, Microsoft Windows background that was popular for a long time, you know. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to do one last comparison. Ignore my lousy masking job on the cloud there. I would have done a better job on that, but in the interest of time, I just wanted to get it done. All right, so vote. Original sky, new sky. Original sky. Yeah, see, Rob said it totally looks like the Microsoft desktop image because it was like one field with a tree, and yeah, totally it was. Maybe that's what she was going for. Right? Who knows? Okay, which one? And how was our poll, Rob? Remember to give us a thumbs up. So as we're voting on this, just a reminder that next week we're going to be doing, so September 30th, we're going to be doing sunrise or sunset. So I want to see your sunrise or your sunsets. I'm going to hang on to yours, Shelley, for that one. So sunrise, sunset. And everybody so far is voting for the original sky, and I tend to agree, right? So let's take a look at the full before and after, because I edited this one. Right, so we started with something that was really flat. Actually, I want to undo this one. Started with something that was really flat and reversed, right? Let's reverse this one and compare. Let's reverse it back. Okay. And then let's see comparing these two. Oops, not that one. This one and this one. Nope, wrong one. This one and this one. There we go. Okay. Which one do you like better? So we've already established the original sky. Catherine said she likes the deeper green of the field in the photo with the replaced sky. So yes, we could do that and just not replace the sky. Going back to the part to recapture that sunset. So make sure you read that sunset article, Shelley. The link is in the chat and it'll be in the description area below, right? So if you're voting on these ones that are on the screen now, say left or right, or the flipped one is on the left, okay? The original one is on the right. Okay, so everybody's liking the flipped one. So everybody says flipped. So because your eye wants to go this way, right? Because the other way, let's look at them one by one. Right? This way, it's coming into the scene, going up the hill. Can you see that? Right? Coming into the scene, going up the hill. Does this feel like uphill? Versus, does that feel like it's going downhill? We start at the top of the hill and we go downhill, right? Does everybody agree? This feels like downhill. Okay, so left. Nope. Now I flipped them somehow. Okay, I must have flipped them. I don't know what I did, but I know what you mean. So this is the one we want, right? This is the one we want. Flipped, but like the color and the clouds on the non-flipped one. Okay, all right. Fair enough, Merle. So color and the clouds on the non-flipped one. I actually agree. Yeah, I like the color. Oh, you like the color on this one. Okay. Or on the replacement. All right. Well, we've done a lot today. I had another one that I'm going to save for you guys because there's going to be one where we're just going to do cropping. I'm just going to talk about cropping because you'll notice that a lot of times, like in a lot of these examples, cropping came up again and again and again, right? So cropping and how you choose to crop your image is so important, right? And how you choose to frame it in the beginning, because if we're cropping out half of your image, you could have photographed it closer. So that means you could have zoomed in more, or you could have gotten physically closer, right? So next week, September 20th, we're doing sunset and sunrise. And September 27th, we're doing harvest. Okay, so that could be a harvest moon, some pumpkins in the pumpkin patch, could be the corn maze or a pile of corn. You could go to the farmer's market and see what the bounty and the harvest is there. Or what did you harvest from your own garden, right? Keep watch on the website. I'm going to have an article on garden photography tips next week as well. I took some pictures of our garden, and do you want me to show that one, Rob? Because that actually came out really nice. I took some pictures of our garden. Let me just find it. Grapes and winery. Okay, give me a second. Garden. Okay, so I took some pictures of our garden, and I did just hang on a second. I want this one to be a secret, so I want to show you the before and after. I did some bracketed images, and where are we? Yeah, that one. Okay, so I'm going to show you the bracketed images first. Okay, here we go. Okay, so these are the bracketed images of our garden, and I bracketed because I wanted to capture the sky in the darkest one, and I want to detail in the foreground in the brightest one. So this was blue hour. Okay, so blue hour. And let me show you what I created. So then I pulled it into Luminar Neo. I did an HDR, and I did a sky replacement. Okay, so this was my first attempt. You can see the sky got kind of blotchy. I removed the power lines that were there, and I did a sky replacement to make it a night sky. Okay, so that's from our sky pack number 2 and made it look, blended it. So I wanted it to look like it was believable. And when I showed it to Rob, he didn't know I did a sky replacement. So score. So that's what we're going to be looking for. Next week, this is not a sunset, but you get the idea. We want to see your sunrise and sunset. If you don't have one, get out there and photograph some sunsets and enjoy your week. And we'll see you again next week here on Digital Photo Mentor. Take care.